You like it?
You look 20 years younger.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time. This is part 22 in my deep analysis of the original episodes of the Twilight Zone. So all 156 episodes I'm looking at in more detail, looking at every single episode rather than just doing an overview of the program. And this is the 22nd video I've done on it. So I'm getting into the end of it now. I'm into season 5, the last season. And this particular video has a few weak episodes in it. So a couple of episodes I liked, but yeah, out of the 6, I'd say there's less strong ones than normal, I reckon. So we're starting with an episode called Old Man in the Cave, written by Rod Serling, based on a story by Henry Sleezer. Sleezer. So the Old Man in the Cave starts with this opening narration. What you're looking at is a legacy that man left to himself. A decade previous, he pushed his buttons and a nightmarish moment later woke up to find that he had set the clock back 1,000 years. His engines, his medicines, his science were buried in a mass tomb, covered over by the biggest gravedigger of them all, a bomb. And this is the Earth 10 years later, a fragment of what was once a whole, a remnant of what was once a race. The year is 1974, and this is the Twilight Zone. So this is a really good episode, I think, actually. It's starring James Coburn, and James Coburn adds a lot of gravitas. I think he's got an amazing presence. And also the other main character in it is played by John Harrison, who's done lots of different appearances in the Twilight Zone, and he's brilliant. So those two being in it really helps. But it's like a post-apocalyptic community that are starving and desperate. And you really get that sense of desperation and starvation in the episode. That's done really well. And basically, James Coburn turns up and starts throwing his weight around and tries to get them, well, tries to nick their food, basically. So it's got kind of Walking Dead vibes, even though it's so long ago. And it's also got, because of the conclusion, because of the twist at the end, I think that kind of reminded me a little bit of the original series of Star Trek as well. It's a sort of conclusion that series of Star Trek would have done as well. So I think that's interesting. But I really did like it. I think it's done really well. The atmosphere and the tone of it's really good. And yeah, they just look really desperate in it. I won't tell you what the conclusion is. It's a bit of a twist, but I think it's done really well. So yeah, that's Old Man in the Cave, written by Rod Serling. The next one's also written by Rod Serling. It's called Uncle Simon. Okay, so Uncle Simon starts with this opening narration. Dramatis personae, Mr. Simon Polk, a gentleman who's lived out his life in a gleeful rage, and the young lady who's just beat the hasty retreat is Mr. Polk's niece, Barbara. She's lived her life as if during each ensuing hour she had a dentist appointment. There's yet a third member of the company soon to be seen. He now resides in a laboratory, and he is the kind of character to be found only in the Twilight Zone. Now, Uncle Simon's a funny one because it's very clearly one of Rod Serling's scripts where he wants to portray these nasty people. He does that a lot. These really dislikable characters that are very selfish, self-centered, spiteful, selfish. The thing is, both of the main characters are unlikable. One of them's more unlikable than the other one, but the character called Uncle Simon is really despicable. He's a horrible character. But the niece isn't particularly likable either. So it's a little bit, you're kind of removed from it. Whereas in other ones where he's done the same sort of thing, there has been a sympathetic character in it. So that's a kind of a funny aspect to the episode. It's got a sort of snideness that you might get in Roald Dahl's stuff as well. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Roald Dahl's things. There is a bit of science fiction at the end when he has his will read because Uncle Simon dies through the episode. It's not a massive spoiler, and the twist at the end is kind of a little bit science fiction-y, but it's quite a domestic episode, to be fair. But it's weird because the comeuppance that the person that gets punished by the Twilight Zone is the more sympathetic character. So I do find that a little bit odd. But yeah, I still kind of enjoyed it. It didn't grate on me too much. But I don't think it will appeal to everyone. I think that's an episode that I can imagine people wouldn't like. But it was okay. I didn't mind it so much. So that's Uncle Simon. And then the next one is Probe 7 Over and Out. Okay, so Probe 7 Over and Out begins with this opening narration. One Colonel Cook, a traveller in space. He's landed on a remote planet several million miles from his point of departure. He can make an inventory of his plight by just one 360-degree movement of head and eyes. Colonel Cook has been set adrift in an ocean of space in a metal lifeboat that has been scorched and destroyed and will never fly again. He survived the crash, but his ordeal is yet to begin. Now he must give battle to loneliness. Now Colonel Cook must meet the unknown. It's a small planet set deep in space, but for Colonel Cook, it's the Twilight Zone. Probe 7 Over and Out is written by Rod Serling. It's starring Richard Basehart, who ends up having a huge career, really big actor. And he plays Colonel Cook. And it's another episode where Rod Serling's putting up a warning against nuclear annihilation. And it's got a young Harold Gould in it, which I think is quite interesting. He does a little cameo in it. And Harold Gould is the major actor in, like a character actor that you'll sort of recognise if you saw him now. It's a funny one because it's slow. It's not particularly interesting. It's the twist is a really predictable twist. The Twilight Zone itself had done better already in an episode called 2, the one with Charles Bronson in it and Elizabeth Montgomery. So it had already been done better, and there's a feeling that he thought it was an idea that he could trot out, and it would work, and people would forgive him for its predictability possibly. But I think it's definitely weaker from that perspective. Richard Basehart does a good performance, so that carries it a bit, but it's definitely a weaker episode from that point of view. And then the next one is The Seventh is Made of Phantoms, again written by Rod Serling. And The Seventh is Made of Phantoms starts with this opening narration. June 25th, 1964, or if you prefer, June 25th, 1876. The cast of characters in order of their appearance. A patrol of General Custer's cavalry and a patrol of National Guardsmen on a manoeuvre. Past and present are about to collide head-on, as they are wont to do in a very special bivouac area known as the Twilight Zone. This one is an odd one because you end, I guess, another one where you end up predicting the ending, and I think it could be that the Twilight Zone is now 5 years old. It's in its 5th year, and there's a kind of a rhythm to the twists, if you like, and you can sometimes predict them, and I think it's more and more shocking when you can't. And this is one of those ones where these army people keep accidentally going back in time, or they keep hearing a ghost from the past, and you're just waiting for them to just end up in that period. So I think the fact that it's so predictable is a real shame because it's done well. Warren Oates is one of the main characters, and Robert Bray as well is in it right at the beginning for a moment. So I remember seeing him in lots of westerns, but Warren Oates has been in lots of things, and he's got real presence. So that's all very good. But you got these 3 modern day officers haunted by General Custer's battle against the Indians, against the Native Americans, and it's just a nice concept, but it's too overdone already on the Twilight Zone. So I think that's its downfall really. So that makes it a bit weaker, but it's all right. It's all right. but yeah, it just makes it a bit weaker. So the next one is A Short Drink from a Certain Fountain, again written by Rod Serling. And A Short Drink from a Certain Fountain starts with this opening narration. Picture of an aging man who leads his life, as Thoreau said, in quiet desperation. Because Herman Gordon is enslaved by a love affair with a wife 40 years his junior. Because of this, he runs when he should walk. He surrenders when simple pride dictates to stand. He pines away for the last morning of his life when he should be enjoying the evening. In short, Mr. Harmon Gordon seeks a fountain of youth, and who's to say he won't find it? This happens to be the Twilight Zone. Okay, so this one stars an actor called Patrick O'Neill, who is in looks and in mannerisms quite like James Stewart, and he's this sort of put upon husband who's got this really awful wife, and his brother comes along during the episode and says, I don't know why you put up with her, but she's really, really needy, demanding, rude, obnoxious, quite insulting, and, you know, one of those really nasty characters in the Twilight Zone's canon. And you do wonder why he's so in love with her, really, because there's nothing nice about her. But that is the crux of the episode, that he is so in love with her, he's desperate to keep up with what she wants. And basically, she wants a younger man because he's very old in the episode. And his brother, who's a doctor, has been working on a youth serum. And against his brother's advice, he insists on taking this serum because he wants to decrease in age so that he can go out and party with this wife that's horrible. And basically, it goes wrong. And again, in true Rod Serling style, it gives his brother a chance at the end to rant at the wife about how horrible she is and she deserves the fate that she gets given. But it's a weird one because it's an artificial ending, I think, because she gets her comeuppance, but I would have thought if she's that selfish, she would have just sort of removed herself from the problem anyway. This sort of punishment that Twilight Zone gives her, I think she would have just thought, nah, I'm not bothered, and then just, you know, left the situation. So I do feel like it doesn't really. Sometimes a twist in the Twilight Zone is really powerful because there's no escape. So, for example, like when there was an episode a while back, I can't remember what it's called offhand, but the one where someone is given immortality, like the devil gives him immortality, and he ends up in jail for life, and it ends up that he's in jail forever. So that's a brilliant ending. It's a brilliant twist because he can't escape. Whereas with this one, I just feel like in a week's time, she's just going to bugger off and not even get this, not even feel this punishment or not live with this punishment. She'll just divorce herself from it. So I do think that's worth thinking about when you think about some of the great twists in the Twilight Zone. So this Short Drink from a Certain Fountain does suffer, I think, from an ending that you're kind of expecting as well. It's another one that's quite predictable. There's a little bit of a thread going through these episodes in this particular video, isn't there? It is quite predictable, but also it doesn't really have the impact it could have because I feel like the Twilight Zone punishes her in a way that she can quite easily escape. So yeah, I'd say it's quite a weak episode, and I think it's relying too much on. I think Rod Serling was enjoying writing these nasty characters too much. I think he's done that a few times, and clearly he had a talent for it, but also he must have enjoyed doing it. But I don't think it always pays off. And then the last one in this batch of episodes is 90 Years Without Slumbering. And 90 Years Without Slumbering was written by Richard D. Roy, but it was based on a story called Tick of Time by George Clayton Johnson. And 90 Years Without Slumbering begins with this opening narration. Each man measures his time, some with hope, some with joy, some with fear. But Sam Forceman measures his allotted time by grandfather's clock, a unique mechanism whose pendulum swings between life and death, a very special clock that keeps a special kind of time in the Twilight Zone. Now, 90 Years Without Slumbering, I think is quite a sweet episode. It's not the strongest episode, but it does have a fantastic central performance by Ed Wynn. This is another reappearance from Ed Wynn. So there's several actors that keep turning up on the Twilight Zone, and Ed Wynn has been on the Twilight Zone before, but he's fantastic in these episodes, and it really does help to carry the episode. And he's this sweet old man that's got this real visceral fear of death, and he thinks that if the grandfather clock stops, he's going to die. And he doesn't sleep because he's so worried about the clock finishing, and he thinks his life is absolutely tied to the clock. So his daughter and his son-in-law is being driven mad a little bit by this obsession he's got with the clock, and they want to kind of get it out of his mind, really. So they think it's a problem, and they also don't like the fact that he thinks that it's tied to his death. So they're trying to say, this is not rational. We need to get rid of the clock. And then he's like, you can't get rid of the clock. And he's like, and then they find out that the next door neighbor is happy to buy it. So he's like, oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And then I can go and fix it and like to sort of maintain it, repair it if it needs repairing. I can just check on it and make sure it's working okay, as it's only next door. So he's not removing himself from the grandfather clock properly. And in the original story written by George Clayton Johnson, the character does die. But in the Twilight Zone episode that they eventually adapted from the story, he doesn't. So I think it's okay though, because it's a very dark ending, to be fair, in the original story, and it's still done in quite a sweet way. And I think, just like with Nick of Time, that fantastic Shatner episode where he survives this obsession that almost ruins him. He walks away, and someone else is evidently ruined by it. In this episode, Ed Wynn's character walks away from this connection with the grandfather clock. I think that's fine. I think it works quite well. So this batch of episodes ends with something that I think was quite nice. I can imagine, again, lots of people not loving it. It's not the best episode, but yeah, this batch includes lots of predictable episodes and episodes that aren't like amazing, but I think this last one, 90 Years Without Slumbering, and the first one, The Old Man in the Cave, I think those two are good episodes. And then the ones in the middle, I think, are a little predictable or not particularly endearing. So a funny batch this time. Because I'm looking at every single episode, it means that clearly there are going to be some episodes that are better than others, and I will sometimes get a whole batch which are not that strong. And season 5 does have some of my favourite episodes, but it has got a whole load of weaker episodes as well, season 5. So it's a funny situation in lots of ways, because I wouldn't say don't watch season 5, because there are some of the best ones in season 5, but just be aware that there are some that are just okay. And you might, if it appears on your TV and it's a season 5 episode, watch it, but don't expect it to blow your mind necessarily, unless it's one of those special ones. So there we are. So that's part 22 of my deep dive into the original series of the Twilight Zone. Thank you so much for watching. Please keep commenting on these, because I'm enjoying people's comments on these Twilight Zone videos I do. Some people are giving their opinions of the episodes, which is great. And clearly there are a few people that are particularly interested in these Twilight Zone videos. So thank you for watching. And yeah, stay curious.
Picture of what it's like to be you. Sit up on your